Today, we're going to be breaking down the character Vaush. He's a far left, I don't know, a narco-communist, libertarian socialist, something like that. I'm sure he's changed recently. The point is that he's super far left, but he's not an authoritarian. He is covering the LA riots. He has a series of content that he has done on it, and I have a feeling that we're going to agree aggressively. Why are we doing this when, we're trying to build a quote-unquote never Trump coalition and Vaush could be a part of that? It's because some far left elements are off-putting to moderates and right-wingers to the point that they will never join an anti-Trump coalition as long as there's people saying freakish stuff. So we'll see if Vaush is saying good things, bad things. We'll praise the good things. We'll call out the bad things. Without further ado, let's get this gentleman on stage and let's suffer together.
Why do you think he has the catheter? Do you think it's just like a general old man thing, or like there's something specifically wrong? Broke his penis? Happens to the best of us. You were right about the vetting, by the way. Is this real? Everyone must be seated in the bleachers. Soldiers sitting in the bleachers are to be fit and not look fat. Soldiers in the bleachers will not be allowed to have water, so they must make sure they hydrate properly before. No colored patches. If any soldiers have political views that are in opposition to the current administration, they don't want to be in the audience. They need to speak with their leadership and get swapped out. Basically, they don't want soldiers in the audience rolling their eyes or shake their head in disagreement.
This is probably true. This is probably true. So Wowman says, is today Vaush Day? Yes, today is Vaush Day. Grassroots says, thanks for reading all my deleted typos, a-hole. Well, my apologies. So hold on. 12:15, everyone must be seated in the bleachers. This sounds like a military text. Note, soldiers sitting in the bleachers are to be fit and not look fat. That's also something that sounds legit. Soldiers in the bleachers will not be allowed to have water, so they must make sure to hydrate. It does seem unprofessional, oftentimes aesthetically, to have soldiers and Marines eating and drinking during a speech, and so aesthetics do matter. So hydrating beforehand, I've had to do that during ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. No colored patches. They want them to look uniform. And if any soldier has political views that are in opposition to the current admin and they don't want to be in the audience, then they need to speak with their leadership and get swapped out. There could be soldiers who want to protest by rolling their eyes or shrugging their shoulders or whatever. But as a result, they probably got all the people who were pro-admin to show up and all the people who were anti-admin to not show up, which is why you had the cheers and the sycophants and all that kind of stuff. And also, you have to understand that while the military did swear an oath loyal to the Constitution before it's loyal to the President of the United States, the President of the United States is the chief executive of the armed services and therefore is like the highest level. He's not technically a general. He's like a civilian leader, but you have to understand that within the chain of command, there is no one higher than the president. So even if you don't like him, if he gives you a lawful order, you have to follow it. LB says, or you could just listen to the LAPD chief of police interview. It's very short. Okay, maybe we will. Dank Brandon says, Connor, did you see the video of the cops busting their own windshield? I keep hearing it was busted while they were gone and haven't found the full video. Wondering if you've seen it. I haven't. Anyways, let's go.
I have no idea if this is real, but
it's probably real.
Choose to believe that it is. What are you looking at, man? He's having a Biden moment.
Wow.
Wow.
That's a beautiful sight, and it's a beautiful sight to be with you in a place called Fort Bragg. Can you believe they changed that name in the last administration for a little bit? But we'll forget all about that. We're going to forget all about it. I want to just say God bless the U.S. Army and God bless the USA.
Brave.
Great place. Great group. I want to thank so many incredible soldiers and paratroopers, pilots, warriors for that awesome display of pure, unrivaled American military might. I just saw something that was crazy. You don't want to mess. I've been saying a long time, we have the best. Nobody even comes close, but they just gave me a display that you might be lucky not to see it because it's a little scary. It was beautiful to watch. Let's hear it for the Army Special Operations and Command and the 82nd Airborne Division and the 18th Airborne Corps. What a show it was and what a show it continues to be. And Saturday is going to be a big day in Washington, D.C. You know, a lot of people said, we don't want to do that. I say, yeah, we do. We want to show off a little bit. You know, recently other countries celebrated the victory of World War I. France was celebrating, really.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit, because I think that there is a liberal and progressive hostility to the armed forces that makes this stuff worse than it is. And so, as an indication, Fort Bragg, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a former Marine, so I don't keep up with Army lore. I'm sure that soldiers do keep up with Army lore more, but you got to understand that these are normies, okay? 18 to 22-year-old kids who enlist for the first time, who are looking for the GI Bill, who want to establish themselves economically, who want to pad their resume and all that kind of stuff. And so having them cheer along political lines is cringe and is kind of violating the concept of the impartiality of the military. But you also have to understand that there's like a cultural undercurrent. And the cultural undercurrent is that the right wing is disproportionately represented in the enlisted class of the military, and that the left wing is disproportionately hostile to the military of the United States of America. Regardless of whether or not that's true, you have to understand that that's the way that it's perceived. And so having like a slight right-wing bias in the military doesn't mean that they're all going to violate their oaths to the Constitution and they're all Trump sycophants and all that kind of stuff. What they're looking for, similar to everybody else in the world, is they're looking for pride. They're looking for esteem. They don't want to be ashamed of what they're doing. They want to go out and do it well. And that's the military virtues. So if you have a bunch of, West Coast or Pacific Northwest or East Coast academic freaks who come in and say, actually, you should be ashamed of your military history. Actually, you should be ashamed of your former leaders from a few generations ago. Actually, American imperialism is bad. You know what the enlisted reaction to that is going to be? It's going to be, fuck you. That's going to be the reaction of every 18 to 22-year-old, regardless of their political inclinations. So if you don't want the military to be hostile to the left, if you don't want to be pushed into the arms of a demagogue or dictator, then maybe don't treat these people like shit. That would be my primary advice to liberals and progressives who are hostile to the military-industrial complex. They're as human as anybody else, and they want the same things that you do, which is pride, esteem, purpose, all that kind of stuff. The cringe is over 9,000, says Silver. Yeah, probably. Fung Dark says pretty clear with how ready the crowd was to slurp. Yep. LB says, or you could listen to the LAPD chief interview. Cool. I'll do that later. And then you talked about the windshield video. All right, cool. Aaron Roman says, Counterpoints, I can't wait till he gets karmic justice. Yeah, I'm hoping for the midterms he becomes a lame duck. Grassroots says, like, you don't want to be sitting behind the president on camera and be sleeping on your palm or drinking Gatorade or spitting tobacco into a bottle. I may have misheard what the complaint was. No, that's exactly right. They don't want you chugging water. They don't want you eating a sandwich. They don't want you opening a bag of chips. They don't want you spitting dip into a can. They don't want you drinking water. They don't want you to do any of that kind of stuff that might be perceived as unprofessional while you're on video. The military, oftentimes the phrase perception is reality was used in the military to require us to do ridiculous things because aesthetics were as important as anything else. Silver says the reason they are poor is because they're squirting. Silver, behave yourself. LB says the soldiers were used to promote Trumpito's fascism. Shame on their commander. Well, you got to do what you got to do. He's part of the chain of command, so it is what it is. Christian Blair says, again, Trump is intentionally breaking standards held by every other president. Yeah, he's trying to blur these lines. Absolutely. Sacred Snow says, why is it that the military can't espouse political opinions online, but they can cheer Trump, boo Biden at a rally? Hypocritical, genuinely curious if there's policy or just Trump. There is policy. This typically isn't allowed. But Trump is the chief executive of the admin. So if he doesn't want to keep the rules and norms of the prior administrations and he permits this to happen, what are we going to do? Right? What are we going to do? We can call it cringe. We can call it stupid. We can call it messed up. We can call it dangerous. But what are you going to do? Are you going to go to these people's chains of command and say that them booing and cheering the president of the United States is inappropriate? I agree with you that it's inappropriate. But guess who the highest person in the chain of command is? Donald Trump. Dude Mansu says, how could you be hostile to Byrne and Sherman? My thoughts exactly. From Bumbly says, no hands in pockets. I hated that rule. So did I. I understand it during like parade, but when you're just casually hanging out at the bus stop, I would love to jam my hands into my pockets. Val says that's more of a leftist issue that bleeds over into normally liberals. I like I spent 8 years in the United States Air Force and 4 in the Army National Guard, and leftists and libertarians are the problem. Sure. When in the military boo Biden, they weren't booing Biden explicitly. They were booing the name change of this base. And you have to understand that when these bases were built 100 years ago, they were trying to reconcile with the Confederacy, 100 years ago and change, right? They were trying to reconcile with the Confederacy by allowing the Confederates and the Southerners to have their Southern heroes. Now, the problem, of course, is their Southern heroes fought for slavery, right? So these are effectively rebels that have been valorized by the military establishment because they're trying to do a cultural olive branch to the South. That's why these bases were named after Confederate generals. Now, what you have to understand, though, is in the 20th century, American service members deployed out of these bases. And so I've heard about Bragg for years because I think it's one of the primary infantry training centers. So you're talking about 100 years of American infantry being trained at Bragg and then going out into the world and fighting the America's battles. And there's a lot of nostalgia and pride that is associated with that history. And so when you change it to, I'm being exaggerative, but when you change it to like Harvey Milk's LGBTQIAAA drag queen story hour base for the differently abled, the Army isn't going to like that. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but you get my point. Silver Jacket Man says, I've said it before. I don't want things named after defeated enemy generals, but Braxton Bragg wasn't even good. He got his butt kicked by Grant and only won on Longstreet. Okay, cool. Aaron Roman says, I respect the military and Marines, but some of the defense budget could go towards helping domestically with higher education, lunch programs, and better civil rights protections. Okay. Anyways.
They were all celebrating. The only one that doesn't celebrate is the USA, and we're the ones that won the war. Without us, you'd all be speaking German right now.
They want that, though.
Maybe a little Japanese thrown in.
That's
we won the war. We don't celebrate, but we're going to celebrate.
We have a president of the United States who doesn't know the difference between World War I and World War II. Holy crap, I hate that so much. It actually gives me a stroke.
Celebrate on Saturday, and we're going to celebrate from now on. We're going to celebrate our great achievements. This week we honor 250 years of valor and glory and triumph by the...
Dank Brandon said it was Fort Liberty, dude. That's obviously better than naming it after a traitor. Listen, I thought it was the Harvey Milk drag queen story hour LGBTQIAA center for differently abled people. This is the first time I'm hearing Fort Liberty.
Greatest fighting force ever to walk the face of the earth, the United States Army. For 2.5 centuries, our soldiers have marched into the raging fires of battle and obliterated America's enemies. There's never been anything like it. There's never been a force like this. And I rebuilt it. I gave you so much money for 4 years. It was crazy. And we just approved our largest budget for military operations, over $1 trillion. We've never even come close.
Sorry, this is why I hate Trump. 3 months ago, he wanted to cut the DoD budget in half and have Russia and China scale their military budgets to cut their budgets in half. And now he's proud of $1 trillion expenditure. Holy crap, this dude has like no consistency and no principle.
They are amped up back there.
Smashed foreign empires, humbled kings, toppled tyrants, and hunted terrorist savages through the very gates of hell. Our soldiers do not rest until they win. You know that better than anybody. From June 1775 to June 2025, those foolish enough to challenge America's army have been met with unyielding strength, unbreakable spirit, and unstoppable, overwhelming force. Time and again, our enemies have learned that if you dare to threaten the American people, American soldier will chase you down, crush you, and cast you into oblivion. That's what happens, unfortunately.
Woo! You got to understand, if you're an infantryman, this is what you want to hear from your chief executive. You want to hear, we're fighting for good. We're kicking everybody's ass. We're the best army that's ever existed, et cetera, et cetera. You have to understand how this plays to the base. Even if you don't like it, you have to understand it. Sacred Snow says, and the soldiers cheered him on, not even realizing he doesn't know the difference. This is North Korea style stuff. Yeah. This is how republics die. This is how nations die. But I'm going to tell you that the reason why he's able to exploit this loophole in our culture, where he's able to cheer on the militarism, and then people are like, yeah, based. The reason why they do that is because, let's face it, there's broad swaths of our population that are hostile not only to American imperialism, which I'm not, hostile not only to American militarism, which I think is based, but you can think is cringe. They're hostile to the soldiers themselves. And so you have to understand why these people are doing what they're doing. If you don't understand it, then you're going to be victim to this repeatedly. Aaron Roman says Harvey Milk was the name of the boat, the USS Harvey Milk. Aaron Roman, I'm being sarcastic. As a matter of fact, I'm going to explain my joke just in case somebody gets mad and emails my boss. Harvey Milk was a naval sailor, but what he is most famous for is being like, what is it? American politician. And he was one of the first openly gay American politicians in the world. And he was very controversial. And I think he was assassinated. I think he was shot and killed. And so the military, because there are gay servicemen in the military, they honored Harvey Milk by naming a ship after him. But I'm pretty sure that there's some controversies of his where he was either like dating people that were young, or he thought that it was normal, or he said something about, kids or something like that. There was something going on where there was like something legitimately creepy about him. I forget what it was. And we just kind of like ignore the creepy thing because we don't want to deal with it. But he's an LGBTQIAA plus icon. And so I'm being sarcastic and saying that they named a base after him. I'm not being serious. I'm just telling you, conservatives are obviously, if you take a Confederate general and you replace them with a gay icon, they're obviously going to view that as a middle finger to the disproportionately Southern conservative enlistee infantrymen who serve at Fort Bragg. That's what I'm saying. Dude Mansu says, Valor, Fort Liberty instead of Fort Bragg. Even as a progressive and fervent Confederate hater, I can see how that sucks. Yeah, Liberty just feels like very ephemeral. You can say it's better than naming it after a Confederate general. I would probably concede that. But I'm just saying, like, Liberty is very, like, ephemeral and soft. Name it Iron Liberty. You know what I'm saying? Billy Koo says, Fort Liberty sounds... Billy Koo says something I can't repeat, but I can't object to either. I understand the logic of it. LB says naming federal and public spaces after traitors is outrageous most of the time to keep racism alive. Yeah, but it was done 100 years ago. That's the point. Val says, last I heard, he's been effing over the 19Ds and cutting several cavalry regiments. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that Trump is cutting all sorts of different things that are detrimental to the military, but it won't matter because he has the aesthetics of being pro-military. AF says, have you heard about the Patriot missiles from Ukraine getting redirected to Israel, potentially setting up for Israel versus Iran? Yeah. I haven't heard it, but I'm not surprised. Silver Jacket Man says, I don't get it. Bragg was a bad general. That's like having Fort Custer, and that's not even being totally fair to Custer. He had a decent career before Little Bighorn. Silver Jacket Man, I'm going to explain this. I'm going to go full screen, and I'm going to explain this, okay? So, believe it or not, culturally, the United States of America during the Civil War was cut in half. There was the Confederate half and the Union half, okay? And the Union half has a Yankee pride because they won the war and emancipated the slaves and took part in Reconstruction and all that kind of stuff. But the Confederate half was humiliated because General Lee, Stonewall Jackson, a few other people were semi-competent generals, and they did the narrative that they were just defending their homes and defending states' rights, and they didn't really care about slavery and all that kind of stuff. And there's all this kind of coping and seething that happened after the Civil War. Excuse me. Excuse me again. But the coping and seething done after the Civil War, the United States still needs enlistees from the South. Okay? You can't just have Yankees fighting your wars forever. You can't just have Westerners fighting your wars forever. There's a proud military tradition from the South. And so if you want those people to fight in your wars, then you need to give them some level of cultural concessions. So during the early 20th century, the cultural concessions were naming military bases after Confederate generals and Confederate figures. That way, the sons and grandsons of Confederate soldiers would say, yeah, we lost the war. Yeah, we got our butts kicked. Yeah, the federal government is cucking us and forcing us to desegregate and hang out with black folk. But at least we still have our heroes. At least we still have our culture. At least we still have our military tradition. Therefore, I'm going to enlist. You can say that that's immoral. You can say that that's bad. You can say that it's evil, whatever. This is an appeal to practicality, not to morality. So I think you can understand it. You just think that it's bad. LB says, why can't the military DOD pass an audit? Maybe they should be held to a different standard. Because they have hundreds of billions of dollars of equipment every single year. And it's hard to inventory that much equipment. My understanding is that entire class of ships was named after civil rights leaders. Sure. Pachydermis Absurdus says, Milk and the mayor were murdered by Dan White, who later claimed it to have eaten too much junk food with the infamous Twinkie defense. The jury nullified and found him not guilty. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. K Soko says the South lost. At what point in will they let it go? Y'all lost, move on. They're not going to let it go. It's like China with the century of humiliation. They're not going to let it go. It's going to be a part of their culture forever. And then what was the other thing about the Confederate losses and all that stuff? Reconciliation. Oh, yeah. So one of the things that was really interesting is I read a couple of books related to World War II. And what was interesting was in both books, unrelated, it was in the Marine Corps. I don't know if you guys have been a part of like a big international corporation or organization, but oftentimes when you're a part of a corporation or organization, there will be tribal groups that will emerge within the organization. And they like to like play with each other, make fun of each other, all that kind of stuff. Well, in male-dominated organizations that I've been a part of, it was sports teams. So people would be like, oh, I like the Green Bay Packers, or, oh, I like the Tampa Bay Lightning hockey team, or, oh, I like the Panthers or something like that, right? And so the sports teams is how modern people show friendly rivalry between different groups who come from different regions of the United States. Well, back in World War II, because most of these people's grandparents had fought in World War II, the way that they used to banter with each other was through who fought for the Confederacy and who fought for Yankees. And so some of the banter that was happening in the Marines in particular, both of the books that mentioned this were in the Marine Corps. They were talking about how the Yankees would dunk on the Confederates, making fun of, them losing the war and being like slave owners and all that bullshit. And then the Confederates would dunk on them by making fun of the Yankees for getting their asses kicked in half a dozen battles. And that's how they did the banter. So you have to understand, it's not like all these kids from the South are like, oh my God, the South will rise again. Let's reestablish slavery. That's not it. It's just like a cultural affinity for where you come from, even if where you come from is bad. And I think you guys can understand that logically, if not emotionally. Pachydermis says, the creepy thing about Milk might be that he encouraged gay kids to flee the heartland where they were being persecuted and get themselves to the cities where gay communities would care for them. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was, somebody said groomer earlier in chat. I didn't address it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that helped support like a quote unquote grooming narrative. Christian Blair says, that might be justification giving nuance to Southern pro-Confederate soldiers if Reconstruction didn't end in the South after 1877, but it did. Sure, we do not follow our virtues perfectly. Dude Man Sue says, the South, some of the best crayon eaters, they had no choice. New England still produced Chamberlain, though. Yeah. Dude, you have to understand Southern boys can fight. It's part of their culture. It's part of their character. They like to scrap. There's no Yankee pride because the Yankees won, so it just became American pride. Yep. But you got to understand that's not the way it was 100 years ago. Christian Blair says Reconstruction ended in the Compromise of 1877, and Hayes pulled out the troops out of the South, and Jim Crow was established. Sure, but I don't know what you saying that changes anything about what I said. Silver Jacket Man says I fully grok the lost cause narrative. My thing is that Fort Lee or Fort Jackson, at least, the Yankees didn't build a Fort McClellan because he sucked as a commander. Yeah, exactly. AF says he's also 6'3", 220 pounds, according to his doctor. He has the best doctors. No one's ever seen the doctors like his tremendous doctors. Bo Dickerson says, Cotter, fun fact, the LSU Tigers are named for their regiment nicknamed during the Civil War. Interesting. That's cool. Trans people were able to serve in the military longer than the CSA existed. That's pretty funny. LB says, that's bullshit, Connor. They have a responsibility to account for the money. I think they have too much money. They're not responsible. Okay, have fun with that. Silver Jacket Man says, I hear you, though. If we rename it, we have to name it something metal and unwoke. Let's go for Fort Screaming Iron Bald Eagle. Exactly. The new name has to be better than the old name. So if you're going to rename Bragg to Liberty, Liberty is ephemeral. And it's about drinking and going to strip clubs and protesting and screaming and riding a motorcycle. It's all very hedonistic and self-serving, right? Whereas the what is it? Fort Screaming Iron Bald Eagle covered in J dams is more metal. That would appeal to, War on Terror generation a lot more. I think the USMC passed their audit. Yeah, that's because we're poor and we don't have anything. K Soko says, fuck any person who flies a Confederate flag. I'm a Yankee. I'm not defending them. I'm trying to explain the logic. Relax. Some of y'all are getting hyped. Starhawk said he did have a relationship with a 16-year-old that didn't erase the good he did, but it's cringe to pretend it didn't happen. There you go. Fort Screaming Iron Eagle covered in J dams. That's where we landed on. LB says Confederates are traitors and should be told so. Acknowledge your grandpappy was a traitor and move on. My grandpappy was a Yankee, so I don't care. This is no skin off of my ass. I'm just trying to explain it to you. I get that as a black woman, you might not want to hear that the traitors, the former traitors of our nation, are required in order to serve in our modern military. But it's true, and you have to deal with that fact. Dark Brandon says, why is it straight people can claim to be concerned about kids, but if gays do it, they're pedos or groomers when most pedos and groomers are straight people? Because Dank Brandon, sorry for calling you Dark Brandon. I'll tell you why. And this is not an actual criticism of decent, kind gay folk who are taking care of homeless youth who are kicked out of their house, okay? I'm not talking about that. If you want to help gay folk, help gay folk. That's not what I'm talking about. You might have missed the stream where I talked about my friend Gay Zach. Gay Zach was a 15-year-old kid that I was hanging out with when I was like 16 and 17. And Gay Zach dropped me. He asked me to drop him off at his boyfriend's house. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I know you're fighting with your parents, so I'll drop you off at your boyfriend's house. No big deal. I'll give you a ride. His boyfriend was like 38 and he was 15. And he acted like that was normal. And I almost called the cops. I was almost like, this dude is getting molested by a 40-year-old. But effectively, Gay Zach was like, no, like, I'm almost an adult. I know what I'm doing. Gay Zach, he's my boyfriend. He doesn't abuse me. He doesn't hit me. He's not molesting me. Like, I'm almost an adult. I know what I'm doing. Leave it alone. And so even though I was uncomfortable with it, I was like, okay, well, fuck it. He says that he's not being abused. So I guess I'll just like let sleeping dogs lie. Right. But then Gay Zach, this happened at the movie theater. Kids like to hang out at the movie theaters. He shows up and he's like, oh man, I just had the craziest day. And it's obvious he's trying to look cool, right? But he's like, oh man, I was just at this party and we were doing meth and Molly and we were having an orgy. And he's still 16, man. He was 15 when I met him and he was probably 16 when he told me this. He's like, oh yeah, I was just at an orgy and it was crazy. And, we did all this crazy stuff and blah, 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 blah. And he goes into like crazy descriptions of all the stuff he did. Number one, gross. Number two, Why is a 16-year-old kid at a hard drug fueled orgy? You know what I'm saying? So you can say like Harvey Milk encouraging, gay teenagers to escape the oppression of their religious Midwest states and go to the gay community so they can get actual emotional support. I totally understand, but you can't understand. You have to understand that that is skeevy and gross. Okay, but that happens with straight kids too. Dude, I know, I'm just going to be real, Dank Brandon. I know 0 kids who had hard drug orgies with adults when they were 16. I know 0. Okay. I know half a dozen gay folk, and the one gay kid says that they were having hard drug orgies. And then healthy chunk of people in my gay chat are like, yeah, promiscuity is a problem. They're like, crazy hardcore promiscuity is a problem in the gay community. So you can act like, oh, the straights do it too. Okay, it's fucking gross when the straights do it too. Nil. Oh, come on, man. We've all been to gay drug orgies at least once. Yeah. Cope and seethe, chat. I'm not buying it. Let me let the dogs in real quick. They're scratching at the door, but we'll talk about hard drug orgies for another 2 minutes, and then we'll get back into the content. Oh, my legs. Come on. Lie down. In, out, in, out, in, out. Dude, the dogs never stop. They just need to lie down. Holy crap. Go lie down. That's the deaf one, so me yelling at him doesn't do anything. Dank Brandon says, why is it that straight people can claim to be concerned about kids, but if gays do it and they're pedos or groomers? I just explained that one. Grassroots says, JHC, blaspheming in my chat. I just saw a dude absolutely obliterate a deer at 45 miles an hour on my street and spew gore all over my motorcycle. I live on a one-way street. Holy crap. K-Soko says, people fly him in Cleveland. It's disgusting, and every single one of them is racist. I don't know what you're talking. Oh, Confederate flags. Got you. 16 in the 60s is like 23 today. AO. Okay. All right, guys. I'm not going to be making excuses for underage hard drug orgies. If you want to do it, you do it. I'm not doing it. AF says, laugh my ass off. USMC audit says, here you have 7 guns, 14 bullets, 1 set of 20-year-old NVGs. Yep, they're right here. AF, I don't know if you're a Marine veteran or if you're just familiar with Marines, but yeah, like I was using cleaning equipment, like vacuums and buffers that were decades older than me. And the Marine Corps refused to get rid of them because even though they were purchased in like the 70s and 80s, they still function just fine. The buffers that we use, we had to buff and clean the hallways in Okinawa every single week. We actually just spent days, weeks, months cleaning our barracks. And the buffers, I would not be surprised if people nowadays were still using the equipment that I was using 20 years ago. Aaron Roman says, so Brown versus Board of Education in the passage of the 19th Amendment was too far for some people. My ancestor Molly Cully fought for that. Women can vote. I don't care. Women are people, I guess. Bo Dickerson says, gay Zach sounds like a sci-fi space warlock. Well, he pretty much was. I'm glad that liberty and the Constitution are woke. Yep. You don't have to explain sorry losers to me. Okay. Dank Brandon says, okay, but that happens with straight kids too. I'm just going to tell you, I know zero. You know what the straight kids were doing? Sorry, we're getting derailed, but frankly, we're more entertaining than Vaush, so we're just going to do it. The straight kids were having their first girlfriends and boyfriends from like 13 to 17, and some of them were promiscuous and some of them weren't. And the promiscuous girls who hooked up with multiple dudes, they got shamed and they got called sluts. And then there was very rich kids who had very nice cars and they had access to very nice drugs like cocaine. And they would occasionally have the most attractive girls over to their school, and they would drink and do cocaine. And some people would hook up and some people would have sex. But any girl who hooked up with multiple dudes was considered a slut. Any girl who hooked up with multiple dudes at once was considered a massive slut. What else was it? doing cocaine was viewed as like the rich cool kids did it, but it was way too powerful, and some of them like burnt out on hard drugs really fast, and they fucked up their lives as a part of it. And so while drug culture was big, where lots of people smoked pot, a healthy chunk of people did coke, everybody drank, there was still kind of like this like foreknowledge that you shouldn't do hard drugs too much, because even the people who are doing hard drugs and they're rich enough that their daddy can bail them out of jail and prison, they were fucking up their lives. So no, I'm not going to compare a couple of rich kids when they're 17 doing cocaine and maybe having sex to a 30-person mixed age orgy fueled by methamphetamine. I'm sorry, these are not the same things, and I'm not going to pretend that they are for your sense of liberal or progressive egalitarianism. It's not going to happen. Bo Dickerson said, and so the Dark Lord Gazak cast the galaxy into eternal darkness. It's true. And if promiscuous people were doing that, I would call them fucking gross as well. It's not homophobia, it's promiscuous phobia. Fung Dark says gay party culture really is something else. Yeah. And that's the other thing, is like gay people are like, yep, sounds familiar. AF says, Connor, be honest, how many boots in training are running around with gun-shaped sticks they found in the woods? Lots of them. But I'm a bisexual, and it was fucking gross, says Grassroots Hegemon. There you go. Grassroots, you're bi? That's surprising to me. Pelican says, 37-year-old here. The early 2000s was a wild time for sure. It wasn't all the time, but there were gross-ass people who would let kids do whatever they want where I grew up. Yep. Eric Dom says, bit off topic, but where is the political leader was the cutoff point where the Dem politics become preferable to Republicans in your view? If Democrats become Republicans from 30 years ago, if they become run by neoconservatives who they use social programs in order to promote a moderately stable, semi-conservative society. It doesn't have to be religious literalist. It doesn't have to be authoritarian. It doesn't have to be anything like that. If they're constitutionalist and pro-gun, and by the way, we can talk about gun control that actually works, but the gun control policies proposed by Democrats right now are so stupid, it makes my mind swim. Then we could have a conversation about a party switch, but I'm not interested in it right now. Wow Man says, my goal, if I was to run my politics perfectly, would be to fight for the soul of the Republican Party and try to reestablish some sanity to the Republican Party. I understand that might not be possible and it could be a losing fight, but I think it's what I got to do. Wow Man says, did you ever hear the tale of Darth Gazak the Wise? K Soko says, we still need to fix the sexual depravity in the gay community. Coming from loved experience, underage gay sex and domestic violence and drug use is a massive issue, more prevalent than among straights. We need to reform gay sex culture. Sure. And bear in mind, like, I'm not hostile to gay folk. I'm not hostile to trans folk. So, I'm hostile to promiscuity. LB says, I think you're sheltered, Connor. Straight dudes molest and rape more than anyone because they're more of the population, LB. This is something, I'm going to be rude. Sorry, you guys are going crazy on the gay and drug sex topic, which is why we haven't moved off of it. You need to understand per capita. So, as an example, the most obvious example is homicide statistics. 90 to 95% of homicides are within racial groups. So black folk kill black folk, white folk kill white folk, and Hispanic folk kill Hispanic folk. Okay, so let's put that as a limitation. Then, if you look at the amount of homicides in the United States, half of all homicides are caused by white folk and Hispanic folk. So you could say most of the, I don't even know if this is true, but let's just go with it for the thing. You can say most of the homicides in the United States are committed by white and Hispanic folk. That's true. But black folk are only 13% of the population, and black males are only 6% of the population. So 6% of the population engages in roughly half the homicides of the country. So if you keep this in your mind, so if you multiplied the black male population within the United States by a factor of, 10, then their homicide would dwarf the broader population. And this isn't to make some kind of moral judgment. This isn't trying to say like, oh, black people are bad because of homicide. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there's a disproportionate problem that needs to be addressed. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, well, I'm going to do like 3 or 4 more gay drug comments, and then we're moving on. Jonah Boy says, gay drug orgy or dog warts, which way, Western liberal? Honestly, gay drug orgy. The dog warts question was off the chain. Val, I thought it was weird when Marines were still carrying M16s and we had M4s. Yes, we're very outdated. Silver Jacket Man says, are there any soft drug orgies like soda and cigarettes? Aaron Roman says, my philosophy is I'm not bothering with you and with what I do and who I love, I'm not your problem. You could be my problem if you're doing hard drugs and, mixed age sex orgies. The LB says the 40-year-old ogling teenagers are dudes like Trumpito. They're a dime a dozen. Okay. Are they having mixed age hard drug orgies? We were drinking Vault and doing sick kick flips at the local unincorporated town church. All right, we're done with the drugs. Okay. I love you guys. We're done with the drug gay sex rant. Let's get back to Vaush complaining about the LA riots, okay? Last 2 comments. If a fellow member of the LGBTQIA plus community is acting grotesque and anyone in the heterosexual community was acting grotesque, I would call them out. That's fair, and that's what I'm doing. Dude Man Sue says, if a hetero guy or a girl had sex with someone twice their age at 15, I would find that weird and gross as fuck when I was that age and still do. Good. All right. Let's stop with the gay sex. Let's stop with the drugs. No, Dark Brandon, you don't need to apologize. It was interesting, and it's more interesting than Vaush. So you don't need to apologize. It's my fault for getting distracted and falling down the gay sex drug orgy pipeline. But it was funny and interesting. So I shouldn't go to church because of all the sexual abuse and cover-ups. LB, you are such a predictable progressive. It's crazy. All right. Anyways, back to the content.
Doesn't sound very nice, but it's true, isn't it? The last sound you ever hear will be the dueling howl of Black Hawks in the dead of night, the thunderous boom of artillery fire, or the ferocious roar.
You know what? We're good. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I'm just going to see if he ever gets off of the military speech. We're going to go to the LA riots. The only thing that we needed is a takeaway. We don't need 40 minutes for a takeaway. We know that Trump is trying to blend the lines between foreign terrorist organizations and protesters and rioters so he can treat them all with a heavy hand. We know that Stephen Miller is a sociopathic freak, and we know that this is something that's potentially dangerous, is the president using the military on domestic citizens. We know all of that. So I'm going to skip ahead to when he's covering the actual LA riots via Twitter, and then we'll move on to the next segment. Not next segment, it's still the same segment, but we'll move to the next part of the content of the same segment.
Was invaded by illegal aliens. Americans voted to end the invasion. Democrat rioters are waging violent insurrection to overturn the election result, continue the invasion. This is basically every tweet of his over the past week or so. He's been doing like a dozen of them a day. Everything is insurrection. This is the language of insurrection. Your lies continue to stoke violent insurrection. Insurrectionist migrant mobs. Everything's an insurrection except for January 6th. The future the Democrat Party offers America is to be, in every sense of the term, a third world nation. Like, it's pretty obvious what he's saying. And I say it's pretty obvious because, like, when I started my channel, the alt-right on YouTube was using exactly the same language to describe exactly the same thing. And Stephen Miller was watching those videos too. It's not like this motherfucker doesn't watch Sargon of Akkad. He's the most, alongside JD Vance, he's the most like obvious, I grew up on internet 4chan Nazi content of the bunch, you know? So, insurrection mob. He's arguing with Gavin Newsom, having fun. He believes in hereditary IQ and that IQ gives you a bigger dick. Let me guess, he thinks lower IQ gives you a bigger dick. And that explains him. Anyway, I don't know how open they're going to get with it. I don't know how explicit things are going to get, but I think you can reasonably assume Trump isn't a white nationalist. Trump is racist, okay? Trump wants Mexicans in America so that they can make the tacos and sweep the floors, you know? He wants Jews in America so they can run his books, you know? He's racist for sure, but it's not that kind of racism. White nationalism is a very specific kind of racism. Yeah, I don't know how much Trump is going to be an appropriate vehicle for this kind of rhetoric. Excerpt from an NYT article. Yeah, I think I read this on stream, but this one is particularly good, I think. Mr. Trump has said that if it was up to Mr. Miller, there would only be 100 million people in this country, and they would all look like Mr. Miller. Yeah, Trump said that. That's not attributed. That's just straight from him. Trump probably doesn't know enough of what he's saying to understand the implications of that. But, you know, Charlie Walsh and Posobiec tweeted out the exact same thing. Time to ban third world immigration, legal or illegal. We've reached our limit and we have huge cultural, educational, housing, financial, and essential services problems to fix now because of it. We need a net zero immigration moratorium with the ban on all third worlders. Yeah. Stephen Miller, a Yarvanite. Stephen Miller is in that camp, but I think he's mostly of his own. Stephen Miller is a Nazi. I don't think he's like a stooge of a Silicon Valley billionaire. He might be on fine terms with some of them, though he hates Elon. But he's just a Nazi. It's not, you know, he has his own ideology.
All right. Close enough that I don't care. And Stephen Miller is a massive piece of garbage. Just to address what he's saying, that I think is a steel man, and I find it overly charitable from Vaush, which is great. Honestly, seeing Vaush have some level of charity is fantastic. But I agree with him that Trump is not a white nationalist, right? He let his daughter marry Jared Kushner, who's a Jew. He has good relations with Qatar and the Saudis. He cares more about money than he cares about racism. He just wants to be slightly racist, and he doesn't want, the Mexicans to be fouling up, quote unquote, his great country and polluting the blood and all that bullshit that he said, right? But that being said, he still wants to have Mexican friends as long as they give him money. So Trump cares more about money than racism. But there are racist people and there are ethno-nationalists who are using Trump as a vehicle with which to achieve their own agenda. I'm going to check in with chat, and then we're going to continue on, sir, with the shorter riot segments, because honestly, I think I'm going to find that more interesting than what, Vaush's current coverage. Although I have to say, listen, I feel like today's content has been haphazard, but it's not, I'm not taking responsibility for that, okay? I woke up, I was ready to cover Vaush, I'm ready to go, but there's no through line here. There's no narrative here. He doesn't walk in with like a coherent perspective. He's just like vaguely left-wing, vaguely socialist, and then he goes, oh yeah, this is bad, all these guys are Nazis, and then also this is bad because of whatever, but there's no like coherent point that I was really able to drag away, and so I feel like Vaush has gotten lazier with time. Back when I watched him, it seemed like he had like a coherent political agenda that he would reinforce through his debates and through his review content. And it just seems to have gotten lost. Like, I actually wonder if he's gotten so wealthy and so successful that he no longer knows what he's doing besides going live and yapping, which is a shame. He used to be like a pretty talented and intelligent guy. AF says, Connor, were you ever given directive to remain apolitical while in uniform? Yes, absolutely. I was told effectively politics was verboten and to never post on social media or talk to a video camera in public and say, as a Marine, as a combat deployed Marine, as a service member, as a this, as a that. I was basically told that I could not only get in trouble with my command, but I could be in legal trouble for expressing political opinions while in uniform. And that's part of the reason why what's going on right now is so repulsive. Daniel Myers says, Trump is slow and boring now. I don't know how people get enthused at his rallies anymore. Yeah, dude. We were making fun of Steven the other day because he was at 1 HP. Stephen Bennell, Destiny. Like he needed his chalky milk and he needed like a nap and stuff in order to get energetic. I feel like that's Trump and I feel like that's Vaush. What are they doing? They're like waking up and they're just yapping, dude. They're not even trying. Michelle Eggleston says, Connor, another 10 years and you could do a sick Commander Adama cosplay. Based? One of my heroes, Commander Adama. Vaush projecting his racism. Well, he's more funny racist than he is anything else. Lords of Don't Ask, Don't Tell with the 40-year-old perverts. Oh my God, LB. Yes, I get it. Straight people are evil too. Conservatives molest kids too. I get it. Thanks. Bo Dickerson, the through line is the gay drug-fueled mixed age orgies. Honestly, I had more time talking about that. I had more time. I had more fun fighting with my conservatarian, liberal, progressive, homosexual, and transsexual chat about gay orgies than I gleaned any new knowledge or wisdom from Vaush. That is sad. We spent more time discussing the nuances of gay party sex culture than we did learn anything from Vaush content. That is embarrassing. AF says fascists will let gays and Jews in such hang around unless they speak out of turn and as long as they pass for white cultured. Yep. The Vaush cinematic universe is in a bit of a low point. Yeah, it does feel that way, right? It feels like his debate arc was his Infinity War and Endgame arc, and now he's in like the post Infinity War, post Endgame lull. He needs to wake up. Vaush had keloid scars. He used to have keloids. He used to have like massive growths in his ears from earrings. Grassroots says, you remember my eyeless, noseless, faceless avatar? Ha ha ha. I am not, nor ever will I be a camera in DC. Weird. The Fortress arc was bad for him, apparently. The Silver Jacket Man says the Castle arc ruined Vaush. He does more fashion review now than actual debate, and it's definitely dulled his proverbial mind razor. Sad, man. Sad. Now Nope No says, Vaush has stopped discussing challenging political ideas since his Fortress arc, which was precipitated by the incident. Embarrassing. AF says, thank you for that answer. Wanted that on record for chat. Cool. Wait, why can't we super chat? We're temporarily demonetized. Gay Space Marines? No, they're asexual. If you want to be gay and be a Space Marine, then go join Slanesh. Is he still in his Fortress arc? Yeah, probably. Maybe I should DM him. All right. Anyways, Grassroots says that comment was at LB. No problems. All right. Anyways, let's see if we can get anything of substance through the next segment. Okay. They don't want you to see this. Vaush is reviewing the LA riots. Hopefully he has something substantive to say. And even if it's stupid, hopefully he gives us enough that we can make fun of him for it.
You've all seen this clip, I take it.
After hours of standing off this situation has...
Hold on. Conserve liberalism says, this guy who publicly fantasized about being a horse while having intercourse with minors really seems to have fallen off. I really did just say that. Nice.
It's now rapidly deteriorated. The LAPD moving in on horseback, firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA. You just shut the...
Okay. This one's made it pretty big. Stuff like this happens all the time. The LAPD loves doing stuff like this. It's how they blow off steam. You can see the cop over on the left. You look at the leftmost cop. Look at the leftmost. Just in case you hadn't seen it, look at the leftmost cop.
You just shut the...
Okay. Getting wacky with it. This stuff like this happens all the time, but in this case, it happened to a well-liked Australian lady reporter. So you've got a bunch of multiplying factors here. Very open, very clear footage. It's a lady, foreigner. Did he just get spooked or what? No, cops just like hurting people. They're just that kind of person. They just, yeah, seriously, like very often when you watch protest footage, you just have to arrive at the conclusion that they just like hurting people. That's really the only, it's not like what they just did helped them in any way, you know? Am I being too optimistic and expecting Australia to take action around this? Actually, my understanding is that they're outraged over there. The clip is blown up, and it's like really getting what action would they take? I mean, if there's national outrage over it, it furthers what I would consider to be a holy war against the United States. Other Western countries recognizing that we are a shithole tin pot, you know, cuspid dictatorship country, and they should not bother with us. Also,
okay, let's break this down. Vaush is correct. This does happen a healthy chunk of the time. That cop probably is an a-hole. And then on top of that, let's just admit something. Everyone likes justified violence, okay? Maybe you don't. Maybe you're a pacifist. Maybe you totally abhor violence. But I almost guarantee you that for 80 to 90% of the people here, you watch action movies, you watch horror movies, you watch action horror movies, you watch all this kind of stuff, and you like it when the righteous hero or anti-hero takes out quote unquote bad guys, right? And so with law enforcement, oftentimes law enforcement officers are people who either they fantasize about the fact that they want to engage in righteous violence, or they're people who want to engage in any kind of violence using righteousness as a pretext. And so what I would say is that that cop effectively had what's amounting to an emotional outburst where maybe some people spit on him earlier in the day, maybe people threw rocks at him, maybe people cussed him out, maybe people did this, maybe people did that. And there's probably some arbitrary line where they said that you can engage people who are within 20 yards of your position. And so that guy did a rough ball estimate of saying, yeah, that person's about 20 yards within my position. And then they shot her in the leg or shot her in the butt with a rubber bullet because they said, yeah, I could probably do that and get away with it. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And then Vaush is asking, or Vaush's chat is asking, what's going to happen? A reprimand. Like he could get written up for, improper use of force. He could get written up for not having good judgment during a riot. He could get written up for this, that, the other. But if he goes another 6 months to a year without another documented case of excessive force, he's going to be back on patrol. Like he's going to be back doing his job, because you have to understand that there are only so many people who are going to do this kind of work. And so they're not going to fire somebody because they had a rules of engagement or ROE that allowed him to shoot this lady with a rubber bullet. And then he did so, but it was inoptical. They're not going to fire you for that. Although if there is, I should caveat that if there's so much public pressure that people do harangue the LAPD for months and months and months and months and months, cops do fire people for political reasons. So it could happen. Thung Dark says, I picked up a little bit of 40K lore off those Joe Rogan green screen clips. It's amazing. Yeah, Warhammer's great. K says, lol. Yes. That dude, conservative liberalism, I think you have the chat of the day, bro. This is hilarious. The guy who publicly fantasized about being a horse while having intercourse with minors really seems to have fallen off. Unironically, I said that and you called it out, and it was a solid joke. 2K Jojo says, could have been based and just owned wanting to come on, man. Come on, man. You're not even trying. Not even trying. I shouldn't laugh, but that was kind of funny. Yeah, well. Oh, man. So anyways, I just started blasting. Horseback. Vaush is on the way there now. You guys are evil. I think Vaush turned 40. Sometimes you just mellow out with age. No. He's in his early 30s. Might be in his mid 30s now. Poor lady, though, can only imagine the sting. Yeah, imagine getting shot by like a paintball gun at like 800 feet per second. Violence never solves anything. People who use violence to solve everything. Yep. Eric Dom says, there are some clips of officers shooting rubber bullets during these protests. I have trouble understanding. One of my closest friends does riot policing, and he would have never abide by such trigger happiness. Well, they're probably pissed off, and Trump told them to go off leash. I understand the LAPD chain of command is separate from the federal chain of command. But what's going on is LAPD is probably telling their people, you need to stomp this out or else the feds are coming. Jonah Boy says, I just finished playing through Doom 2016 again and started Eternal the other day. Glorious, righteous violence. True. Michelle Eggleston says, righteous violence is the entire outline of the plot for John Wick. Yeah, and you literally watch John Wick mow down thousands of goons and henchmen, and you feel nothing. Kay says, but as a cop, you aren't really allowed to have a temper tantrum like that, right? Nope. You can have a temper tantrum as long as it fits within the escalation of force. So again, if he was given a directive that within 20 yards, you are allowed to shoot anybody who comes within that distance with a rubber bullet, and then he rough eyeballed it, and he was like, yeah, she's within distance. Pop. Nope. He's allowed to have a temper tantrum. Is it like that guy that, how can I make my unit look really bad? Yeah. And he's an idiot, and he's going to get other cops hurt. That shooting a reporter in the butt with a rubber bullet because you can is going to mean that there's going to be somebody who watches that footage who's in LA who's going to pick up a brick and throw it at a cop, and he's not going to feel guilty about it at all. Violence is reciprocal. All right. Anyways, you guys are popping off in chat, and I appreciate that. Like the stream, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, you know what? I'm going to plug the PayPal link again because somebody asked for it earlier. So if you got money burning a hole in your pocket, You want to give a super chat, but we're kind of we're demonetized at the point, but you want to donate to the channel. There's a PayPal link right there. I'll answer more questions as we go, but I'm yapping and we're only 1 minute into the content.
Also, by the way, every Hitlerite in this country wants the image of the Los Angeles protest to be the Waymo cars that caught fire somehow. I wasn't looking, I wasn't there, I didn't see anything, you know? They want to say, well, the protests were violent because look at this tin can that hit a cop, you know? The protests were violent. There's the violence. I didn't see no protester shoot a cop. I didn't see that happen. British photographer was shot too. Had to undergo emergency surgery. Jesus. Oh, hey, look at that clip. I've seen that one. I'm familiar with this one. Issue a travel ban. You guys excited for the World Cup? Several other people got shot in the head as well. Yeah, of course. They love doing that. It's like their favorite thing. Honestly, I'd say we're lucky there's been no deaths so far. I think that the LAPD has been restrained operationally. Like the way they have been ordered to conduct their crowd dispersal has been more or less hinged relative to the LAPD, but the individual behavior of the individual police officer still betrays the fact that these people are sociopaths. At least a lot of them are. Again, I don't need to keep, we've done this a million times, okay? Like, I don't need to keep litigating this, but I hope most people understand, okay? It's not about the department policy. It's that the culture of the police encourages and protects the sociopaths who work there, you know? Not every cop is wants to bludgeon people to death sociopath, but there are enough of them and they get a lot of institutional protection.
I feel like this is a little bit of a straw man, but the truth is that there are some psychopaths and institutionally they are protected as long as they follow the rules, relatively speaking. And I literally just told you how that guy is going to get away with shooting a reporter in the butt with a rubber bullet. So, I could freak out. I could fight him, but I'm not really going to. The only thing that I want to add to his commentary is the fact that you have to understand that like sociopathy, at least as far as I understand it, is oftentimes not having empathy or sympathy for people besides yourself. And so you only care about yourself, right? And that's what it is psychologically if you are a sociopath or a psychopath. That's the way that I understand it anyways. And so what ends up happening is you can be incredibly cruel to other people and your cruelty doesn't affect you in the slightest because you just don't have that emotional trigger. You can just hurt other people and there's no emotional response within your internal frame. Now, the way that sociopathy, some of that is like genetic, some people are just like that, right? And there's functional sociopaths and psychopaths throughout our society who don't commit like heinous violent crimes. They just operate without empathy. And then, but what I want to say is that this can be culturally inculcated as well. It can be culturally manufactured. And the way that you culturally manufacture it is you just know that the other side is bad and evil. And unironically, it's that meme. It's like, what is it? The way I wake up and I realize that there's my opponents are ontologically evil. Ontologically evil meme. Which is something that Vaush has like, he used to make this meme all the time. How I wake up knowing my enemies are ontologically evil and there's no act against them, which is wrong. No offense, but anybody who encourages this perspective within their political sphere, not only are they encouraging their audience to be more violent, they are also encouraging the other sides to be more violent. So if you think that spitting on a cop, throwing a brick at them, calling them fascist pigs, all that kind of stuff, if you got to do that as a part of your protest, you do what you got to do, right? This is America, freedom of speech, et cetera, et cetera. However, if you don't think that you're culturally reinforcing that cop to view you as a near existential enemy, like if you say, I had people say that they were going to kill my family. They said that to my face. They were like, oh yeah, man, you can arrest me now, but when I get out, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill your family. Do you know how hard it is not to react to that in the most egregious, violent way possible? Like you actually just have to kind of sit there and stand there and be stoic and not react to it, right? But you can find me. You know what I'm saying? So that's where you kind of have to just bet that this person who has committed murder, but they've only committed murder on other gangbangers and they haven't killed a cop yet. And they're talking shit, but they're not really looking at your name badge. You have to just kind of hope that they're not going to look at your name badge. They're not going to look up your address. They're not going to come to your house, and they're not going to kill you. Like, it's actually totally reliant on faith. Whereas your instincts are telling you, oh, you just said you're going to kill my family. I'm going to do some of the most egregious shit on the planet to you right now, and I will not think twice about it. So I'm just kind of describing it as it is. Thralics. See, and look at the culture that he's inculcating here. Rodney King, George Floyd, who's next? They are basically trying to command a group of individual psychopaths. They are all sociopaths. It's cultural. It's all in police culture. You're falling for rage bait. Vast majority of Dems and leftists support the protests. Could have folded. The IDF chose to become it. Good luck with that Peace Prize now. Yeah, so Vaush is encouraging, willfully or not, the ontologically evil meme. Let's check in with chat before we move on. Dude Mansu says, I dabbled in pacifism back in my day, not in Nam, of course. Best line from the Big Lebowski. Based. Conservative liberalism says, did you see the reporter who got pegged in the forehead from a building window? Not even on the street with the officer. Couldn't have been a threat in any feasible way. I didn't. Brandon Zero says, Cotter, I just kind of accept that this stuff is going to happen in the rioting, and then I just don't watch it that much, to be honest. Brandon Zero says, I told you that his anti-cop takes are going to the moon, and this one is one of his most mild takes. On God, I believe that if you find some of his most unhinged take, you would rage quit the stream. Yeah, he's made me rage quit it before. Like when the female cop is having like an emotional breakdown because she's so worried that people are going to poison her or kill her. And he's like, look at this wussy. Look at this person who doesn't know how to sign up the job. She shouldn't even have a job. Lol. I was like, okay, you're an asshole. Silver Jacket Man says, did you ever do one of those wild dashes for the flag out of cover and catch like 50 paintballs? Yeah, I did. I handed my paintball gun to somebody else and I ran for the flag and I got to the flag first, but somebody was only 3 or 4 feet away and they shot me in the butt as I was running away with the flag. Yeah. Anyways. All right. I'm going to hold it at Haircut Commander and I'm going to continue the content.
Fold to protect each other. So functionally, from a distance, it doesn't really matter who's who. If you want to prove cops are psycho, just pull up footage from the George Floyd protests. Oh, God, yeah. I mean, we spent months covering that. That was like in the early days of the channel. Yeah. I had to talk about this so much more back then because there were a lot more liberals who were watching me who were like getting on boarded to that crap, you know?
And I want to thank Q Streams as well. So we had Ragnar and Q Streams do donos via PayPal. Thank you kindly. Kings and queens. I appreciate you.
Jesus. Well, we'll see how bad it gets here. The funny thing is that the most audacious thing that's happened, like policy-wise, has been calling in the National Guard. The National Guard haven't done shit. They haven't done anything yet because they're just guarding the federal building. They're not out there, you know, protest breaking. That's not their job. They're just standing there. They're just chilling. Are you excited for the World Cup? I'm American, so no. I'll love watching football hooligans face off with U.S. police during the World Cup. Not going to happen here. We don't have that kind of culture. You raise money during the BLM streams, right? Yeah, for a bailout fund. Non-Americans will. We'll see how many of them show up. Anyway, this clip's getting a lot of media attention, but to my mind, the one the media doesn't want you to see, and I mean that, by the way, I'm being conspiratorial. I'm putting my tinfoil hat on. Remember this one? This one's about as explicit as it gets. You've got the guy laying on the ground, and then multiple officers try to get their horses to trample him. Only reason he didn't get kicked in the head there and die was because of luck. I mean, it's, you know, police horses are trained not to trample people. You know, they're trained to be calm. Yeah, they literally turn the horse around to try to get another go at trampling him. Yeah, I wish they trained the police that well. Straight up abuse. Well, it's attempted murder. But the media is not talking about this, even though it's clear as day. There's no other interpretation of what's going on here. Why the cop yank him back down? I don't know. Let the horse.
To arrest him. Sorry, we'll break this down a moment. Well, actually, let's break it down now before we go back to chat. So hold on. This horses, I don't know if Vaush is not nearly knowledgeable enough on his creature of obsession as he should be. So let's go ahead and watch it. So we got everybody surrounding him. They're surrounding him. And here's the thing. This guy, logically, emotionally, is surrounded by fireworks, 4 horses, and dudes with sticks. He's probably having a caveman level instinctive response to what's going on. And he probably feels like he's on the verge of being murdered, right? Because 500 or 1,000 years ago, If 5 people who were hostile to you surrounded you on horses and sticks, you were about to die, right? So he's kind of in like a defensive, pseudo-protective, but also pseudo-submissive stance. But they could be giving him orders in order to lie down, right? You know, lie down, put your hands behind your back or put your hands on your head or something like that. And because he's having an instinctive reaction to being threatened, he's not going to be able to do that because he's not emotionally capable, right? Because he's running on adrenaline. Now, Vaush is saying that this guy tried to intentionally run him over with a horse, which I'm going to put that at 50-50. It's possible that he tried to run him over intentionally with the horse. It's also possible it's a fucking horse, okay? Horses have a mind of their own, and the horses are wandering around in an area with fireworks going off and people screaming, and so they're not fully in control. Dude, they literally just had a firework go off right here. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if you guys saw that. But look at this. Horses are prey animals. They are instinctively ready to run away from anything that's going on. Look at this. Firework. There's literally a firework that goes off like 15 or 20 feet away from the horses. So expecting the police to have a perfect reaction, expecting the horses to have a perfect reaction when the horse instinct is probably to flee, I think is way too much. And the reason why this dude like stands up and then gets yanked back down to the ground is because the cops don't want him to stand up. They want him to get arrested. Okay. So I'll go ahead and rewind a couple of seconds and let it go. I'll put it at a full 50-50 that LAPD officer was trying to run him over with the horse as punishment for resisting. And I'll put it at 50% that the horse is reacting to, I don't know, there's arson fires on screen right now. There's fireworks going off down here. Literally, in my mind, it's 50-50, and I don't know. I would have to know the individual police officer in order to give you like a accurate assessment of what happened. Whew. Haircut Commander says, I put an article in your inbox about the National Guard not getting paid. Yeah, because the feds, when they're deployed by feds, they're supposed to get paid by the feds. The Gon says, Valor Media Network, what do you consider effective gun control? I don't want to get side distracted or whatever, but I don't think an assault weapons ban is going to do anything. I don't think that a confiscation is going to do anything. I'm not turning in my guns if they do a confiscation thing. I like, and this is something that gun control people are not going to like, or excuse me, pro-gun people are not going to like. I'm perfectly fine with red flag laws. I did a red flag law in the United States. This guy was losing his mind, cyber harassing somebody, which I think is a misdemeanor. I'd have to look up the law. They were threatening to kill people. They had guns. They were on meth. They were on weed. And their family effectively said, like, yeah, this dude's crashing out. He has a bunch of guns and he's threatening to kill all of his family members. So rather than incarcerating him for cyber harassment, although I do think that I indicted him for that, I also did an ERPO, Emergency Risk Protection Order. And so what ended up happening was not only did he get arrested for the cyber harassment, cyber stalking, but then he also had his guns taken away with it from him while it was pending trial. A judge reviewed it within 30 days and said, yeah, it's actually justified for you to have your guns taken away from you because you've been sending text messages and Facebook posts and all this crazy shit that you're going to kill all your fucking family members. So yeah, you can chill the fuck out. And then he got put in like pre-trial diversion. So he ended up just having to go to like anger management and AA and all that bullshit. And then basically if he completed anger management and if he completed AA, he would get his guns back. And so to me, I would rather do that than incarcerate someone. I would rather they get one of their rights temporarily taken away. Of course, I would like it to be, reviewed by like a jury of their peers. But I would rather have a right temporarily taken away on review of a judge and a jury of peers rather than incarcerating someone. And so taking the ERPO, the red flag laws, off the table, I actually think is a mistake. Because when you don't have an ERPO, you basically have to let a mass shooting or a murder happen before you can take any action. A lot of American law enforcement is reactive. Nope, no, says Valor Media Network, what content of yours caused your demonetization? It wasn't content. I didn't see anything sussy yesterday. Is Always Sunny clip from yesterday? Nope. It's related to basically somebody had a different account where something got messed up with their AdSense, and then YouTube saw that their channel was on our channel, and so we got hit for their AdSense being messed up. So we have to basically go back to them and say, like, unjack their AdSense and then reapply on our AdSense. So it's just like an administrative thing. Aaron Roman says, if I write my science fiction fantasy adventure stories, promote my blog or book blogs, and mention you can give me a boost at Counterpoints in my post in my community tab, depends on whether or not they're good. No offense, but there's lots of people who want me to do lots of stuff for them. And I have no problems being like, I'm a friend, right? I'm a friendly guy. Hey, repost your PayPal. I'll repost my PayPal momentarily, Grassroots. I'm a friendly guy. I like helping people out. Plenty of people have helped me out, but I also have to say that, like, if your thing is the literature equivalent to smearing feces on the wall, then I might not promote it. I have to reserve that right. Master of Darkness says, oh, cool. I've been wanting to catch you streaming live, Connor. Cool. Well, welcome aboard, Master of Darkness. Number one, I'm live on Valor Media Network Monday through Friday every day, except for Tuesday, generally speaking, 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Also, you can catch me on Counterpoints Politics, which is my home channel. It's got around 5,000 subs right now. I'm live on that channel on Tuesday. So, Kurt Hergenrather says, Connor, we all know why Vaush is watching this video. It's probably for the horses, bro. It's probably for the horses. I'm going to get to this video or this comment, and then I'm going to continue with the content. And then I'll read your comments momentarily.
Let the horses have another attempt to trample him. The reason they want the horses to trample him is because these stupid pigs think nobody's watching them because they're, I don't know, they're 40 years old and they forget that everything has a camera on it now. And they think that any death that's because of a horse trampling will be accidental. Oh.
Jacob, thank you for the donation. And then again, Vaush is posturing, and this is not necessarily accurate. That guy could be an a-hole cop who likes police brutality and wanted to trample a civilian. It also could be, I don't know, there's an arson fire 10 feet to the right, 10 feet to the left from our perspective. There's fireworks going off 10 feet to our right, their left, and they're in the middle of a fucking riot. That could be like another explanation for why the horses are trampling people. But, you know, whatever. Sure. Every cop's a sociopath. Sure, whatever.
Oh yeah, sorry. It went out of control. The guy resisted. The guy this guy charged us. Got under the horse's hooves. There was nothing we could do. Are they getting charged for this? Probably not. No.
Yeah, they're not getting charged for that. Literally, if you wrote this up and you said, in the process of arresting someone, you know, my horse was a little bit spooked. We walked over a civilian. We could have injured them or whatever. But in the context, there was a fire 20 feet to my right. There was fireworks going off 20 feet to my left. My horse got spooked. You're not getting, even if it was intentional, you're not getting written up for this.
Second trampled protester. Is there another one? Is LAPD worse than NYPD? Two bad bitches. Local news basically just repeats whatever the cops say. Yup. Mm-hmm. I think for some reason people still think of local journalists as being like Hunter S. Thompson types or whatever. Like you've got a bunch of like chain smoking guys wearing camp collar shirts who will like run headlong into danger and get the scoop and like interrogate critically the police officers and what happened. That shit doesn't happen. That's fake. That's a misty-eyed, rosy, anachronistic, altogether not really historical portrait of what it may have looked like at some point in the long, you know, far in the past. That is not how it works. Local news literally just repeats the briefings they get from police time and time.
Probably because 90% of cops are decent, hardworking people who actually do their jobs and who aren't racist and abusers. That's probably why, you know, media sides with law enforcement. Not saying that there aren't scumbag law enforcement, not saying that there aren't corrupt media, just saying that not every cop wakes up every single day and thinks about how they can run over a minority with a horse. I get it. Cops are bad. LA riots are good. Media is also bad. I understand it. Okay. Thank you for your insights, Vaush. Thank you for catering to your audience. Let's check in with chat one more time before we move into the next one. Reporter shot by police sides with the police. I'm sure this will be similar, but I actually want to see how he frames it and how he discusses it. Grassroots says, you do not want to be on a horse, which is an animal that naturally is scared of paper blowing in the wind, loud noises, and sudden movements. Yep. They're incredibly large and incredibly powerful. But yeah, they're prey animals. Phylactery says, you'd think Vaush would know more about horses. That's what I thought. Gen X says, Vaush knows horses, though, right? That's what I thought. As a horse enthusiast, you would think that he would know more. LB says, don't believe your lying eyes. So LB, I understand we're not going to see eye to eye on this, and it's not about your lying eyes. I'm going to run this for you real quick, okay? I said that there's a 50% chance that cop ran over that protester intentionally. That's a pretty big stinking chance. It's literally a coin flip. And if that cop was a Boy Scout, and if he got kittens out of trees, I got a cat on my like second or third day on the job. I got a cat. I tried to get a cat out of a sewer. I literally, like, there was a cat stuck in a sewer. I opened up the grate. I crawled into the sewer, but the cat was scared of me, so it crawled further into the sewer. I literally went into the sewer to get a cat. And then I went back because we had to close the grate because my boss wanted me to close the grate. And I went back, and the people were still in their front yard looking for the cat. And so I pulled out the sewer grate, and we left food for the cat so the cat could escape. And so that's the kind of cop I was. And then there was also like other cats that were starving and abused, and I took care of those ones. And there were dogs that were like maimed, and we took care of those ones and took them to the vet. There were civilians that would get injured or hurt, and I would be pretty empathetic and kind of treat the people as I would want a cop to treat my family. That's who I was. And I wasn't the only cop that was like that. There were, out of all of the cops, a third of them are the best people you've ever met. A third of them are very average, and a third of them are pieces of shit, just like every other job that you've ever been a part of. And so if the cop who was riding the horse was a Boy Scout who got kittens out of trees and kittens out of sewers, who took care of animals, who took care of people, who was overly empathetic, et cetera, then I would err on the side that the fireworks and the fire caused the animal to panic. He didn't have sufficient control over his horse, and therefore that protester got run over. That would be my 50%. The other 50% is if it's a psycho cop who fudges reports, fudges his stats, lies about stuff, uses any excuse he can in order to get into a fist fight, shit talks members of the public, and has a routine of getting complaints because he is so rude and so shitty and so abrasive with members of the public that he just has a long line of people that he's pissed off, then I'm going to go with the other 50%. But I'm telling you, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So you can say that you know. Don't believe your lying eyes. You can say you know. I'm telling you, you don't. You don't. You don't have enough information. You don't know what's going on. Christian Blair says, dang, I would have expected Vaush to bust out that point. True. Sacred Snow says, genuine question. If horses are prone to panic, why do they have mounted police at a riot? Because they're 1,200-pound animals, and you can train most of their panic away from them. Eric Dom says, to me, it looks like they're surrounding him to keep him there until an officer on foot comes to put him in handcuffs. They cannot get off their horse because that would do the horse while handling. Yep. You all should have seen the horses on Bourbon Street at 11:50 for Mardi Gras. I'm sure they are worse than the LAPD. My guns burned to death in a boating accident. True. Silver Jacket Man says, I once had a horse legit dart on me because he saw a monarch butterfly and thought it was a predator. Every branch on earth was hitting me in the face. I hate that horse. Grassroots said, had Vaush been riding that horse, thousands would have been trampled as he held up. Come on. Come on. You're not even trying. LB says, you're responsible for your service animal. Stop making excuses for abuse. Nope. I'm telling you, it's a 50-50. You're saying it's a 100%. So it's not a 100%. It's a 50-50. Kingslayer says, I'm cool with red flag laws if there's a felony attached to a false alarm reporter. Okay. Haircut says red flag laws would also help keep people from killing themselves. Potentially. There's the PayPal link in case you wanted to be generous. Somebody's asking for the Discord link. Let me get that to you, and then let's start the next segment. It's the same segment. Let me start the next bout of content. Give me a second. Let me disable streamer mode. Let me go back into my chat. Let me get the Discord invite. Let me copy the link. What? I turned off streamer mode. Streamer mode. Turn it off. Invite. people, copy. Here's the Discord link. If you want to hang out with fellow grill hottists, there's your opportunity. Let me turn streamer mode back on so we don't have to hear all the Discord notifications. And let's move into the next segment of content. You know what I'm saying.
The chaos unfolding in LA is sending shockwaves across the globe. A very own US correspondent, Lauren Tomasi, was caught up in the mayhem, shot with a rubber bullet. Take a look.
I heard about this.
Hours of standing off, this situation has now rapidly deteriorated. The LAPD moving in on horseback, firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA.
You just shut the
Okay. Like, for example, when the BBC reported this as reporter caught in the crossfire, that wasn't because the BBC reporter was stupid. That was because they're a liar.
Doesn't matter how many times you watch it, right? Lauren joins us live now from LA. Lauren, I mean, I think we were all so shocked and so deeply troubled by what happened to you yesterday. How are you feeling this morning?
Morning, Sarah and Carlos. I'm good, thank you. I have a bit of a bloody big old bruise.
Did he think they stopped filming? No, police officers just correctly assume they'll never get in trouble for doing stuff like this.
And it's a little bit sore, but I am all okay, thank you.
Hey, can you talk us through just, you know, it was obviously, it's been a big couple of days, but it seemed to me that escalated, and talk us about to what happened before and then during and after.
Yeah, I mean, we were reporting on the Today Show all morning the situation on the ground in downtown LA. My cameraman Jimmy and I had started by that detention center in downtown LA, and there was, you know, a few skirmishes here and there and a little bit of chaos moments as we went throughout the morning. But it was about 5 o'clock local time when there were suddenly just thousands of protesters on the streets of downtown LA, and we felt that presence of the LAPD and law enforcement really ramp up. Jimmy and I went live. We were doing a cross into the program, and police started pushing their way up the street. They'd begun firing tear gas canisters and those rubber bullets, and we moved onto the sidewalk and really tried to stay out of the way. What you saw, that report, was at the end of that live cross. We'd moved off to the side of the road. We were at the side of police. I had my back to those LAPD officers. I was really focused on the camera and, you know, finishing that report, telling what was happening. And I got hit. Jimmy scooped me up and we made our way out of there as quickly as possible. It
got hit.
A shock.
Oh, I mean, it's a tremendous shock, Lauren, and you were just doing your job, right? And we've been in awe of your coverage for the past few days and how incredibly difficult those circumstances are for you. We know it was tense. I mean, those circumstances that you found yourselves in for that report specifically seemed to be somewhat calmer, and then all of a sudden, you know, he turned and fired at you. It just seems so out of place and so bizarre. Have you managed to, has there been any explanation? Have you been able to sort of gain any intel on how that happened, why that happened?
No, I mean, where we were standing, it felt like things had calmed down a little bit after that big, you know, chaos of moving up the street. And we'd found a moment where police were still standing off there, but you know, it had calmed for a moment. The police were standing still, and that is why we stepped off to the side. We weren't in a group of protesters or anything. We were with other media. I think you can see a cameraman walk behind me in the middle of that shot. So look, we were doing our best to report what was happening from the scene in the safest way we possibly could. And Jimmy and I were listening to everything the LAPD had been saying to us.
But also, you're balancing a lot there, and you've also got protesters who are furious with you.
Who? I have not seen anybody. I have not seen any lefties on Twitter. Who? What? Sorry, this guy's shock collar activated. It's time for more consent manufacturing.
I hate this. Dude, just listen to the story, man. And it's time for more consent manufacturing is pointing to why protesters would be angry with media. There's literally it's not literally. There's actually a guy on screen who is grabbing the camera from the journalist and dragging it over to their face. So number two, we can listen to what she's going to say, and it could 100% be true. I don't like this thing, and LB, I'm not accusing you of it, but it's very frustrating. When you get into tribal politics, there's this presumption that everything that the enemy does is bad and everything that our side does is good, which is so cringe and so stupid and such a waste of time and such a waste of political capital, because then you spend time fighting about what's true instead of just conceding, yeah, you know, there's assholes on your side and there's assholes on my side, but I still think my side is correct. We could spend so much less time fighting about what's factually true if we just agreed that every political tribe has some a-holes in it. Okay? But let's see how it actually plays out.
For the most part, over the last couple of days, I've seen you in every circumstance be calm and talk to these people. You've also been fearlessly unbiased. So that's reporting both sides of it. And then out of the blue, you get lined up.
Yeah. So the reason why he's saying this is because he doesn't want to be accused of anti-police bias.
He's in Australia. Nobody gives a shit if Australians are anti-cop. What are you talking about, man?
Is that how, I mean, you're loath to, I know you, you're loath to be part of this story, but in a way you are, and it's going to have reaction and ramifications across America. That's how bad.
He's saying, listen, you know our job is to cover the police favorably, but unfortunately, as a consequence of what the police did to you, this looks pretty bad for the police.
Does Australia need to sweep for the LAPD? Is there some like pro-cop bias in Australian media that I am completely unaware of, that they have to sweep for law enforcement of a foreign country? What the hell is Vaush talking about? He's taking his beef with local media in the United States who want access and who want to have a favorable relationship with the police so they get better access to news stories. And by the way, law enforcement doesn't view it that way. Oftentimes, like news reporters, if there's a way to sell burn a cop, they're going to burn a cop because they make for great kindling and firewood. So that's not the way that cops feel about it at all, but I could understand it from Vaush's perspective. And then he's projecting that onto an international organization. I just don't get this.
Situation is in LA right now.
Look, I feel embarrassed, quite frankly. I really don't want to be the story.
And she picks up on the messaging there. Yes, no, I get it. This was all unintentional.
No, she's trying to remain as objective as possible, Vaush. You're not paying attention to the information presented, and you're presenting it in a slanted way that favors a narrative that doesn't even necessarily make sense within the context. Dude, this is, you know what? I'm just going to say it. Oftentimes there are times where I pump the brakes on my Vaush commentary because back in the day we had friendly DMs, and also he's a funny guy, right? Despite the horse stuff, despite the memes, despite all the bullshit, he's a friendly guy and he can be intelligent and he can be insightful. But this is bullshit, okay? This is horse shit. And he couldn't defend it in a fucking debate. That's why he's in his fortress arc. That's why he doesn't have anyone that he debates regularly, because they would be able to call out his bullshit. So he just has to go with police bad, media sweep for narrative. He has his talking points before the story even plays, and then he's not paying attention to the information that's actually being presented to him. So he shoehorns his narrative on top of the information being presented, even though it's contradictory. And his audience is dumb enough to fall for it. Dude, I think about this all the time, okay? We got 80 people here, and I'm very proud of this channel, and I love you, and I appreciate you for being here, and thank you for the donations and all that kind of stuff. But I think about this every day, where the people who have tens of thousands of views, they're not insightful, they're not nuanced, they're not intelligent. They found a political tribe that already exists, and they just pander to the existing political tribe. And I don't think I'm like physically capable or morally capable of doing that. But I just can't believe that the rubes in the audience don't see what's happening. I can't believe it. They just want their worldview affirmed at all times, even if the information being presented to them is contradictory to their worldview. It's fucking infuriating, and it's embarrassing. And I'm just going to say it. The reason why I'm embarrassed for Vaush is because he has so much more potential than this. He could be an intelligent, insightful political commentator, and yet he panders to the least common denominator of his audience. It's fucking embarrassing.
A journalist getting fired at by police for literally no reason, caught on video, the sadism of the police with no excuse. This isn't my job. My job is to sit there and dispassionately cover things in a neutral way that actually, you know, reflects positively for the police. I didn't.
No, you stupid asshole. She's saying that she's trying to cover it in a way that's factually true, and it colors the story when you're a part of it. Holy shit. This is so dumb. I'm not going to lie. This is why I hate Vaush's coverage. This is why I don't watch him anymore. It's because he fucking lies. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks when you see somebody who's smart, who has potential, who's charismatic, who's funny, who fucking lies. It fucking sucks. It sucks.
Mean to reveal unintentionally anything sinister about the police.
Part of this, we were just on the ground trying to do our job. I was there, you know, Jimmy and I were doing our best to bring to Australia what is unfolding on the streets of LA. And
why is an Australian news agency concerned with the optics of criticizing American police?
Oh, and then somebody in his chat brings up something that seems contradictory. Let's see how Vaush deals with it.
Buddy, they're all on the same team.
Wow. They're all on the same team. Somebody has a little bit of cognitive dissonance. Why does an Australian give a fuck about pleasing local law enforcement? Oh, they're all on the same team. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Your dismissive comment for 3 seconds about my cognitive dissonance has totally assuaged all of my concerns and anxieties that you might be fucking lying.
A really unfortunate thing that has happened, and I think, you know, as a journalist, we want to be there telling the story. I think, you know, it's a really crappy thing that's happened, but I really don't want to be the story here. It is
so don't focus on it, guys. Don't focus on it. I know that like a bunch of international attention's been drawn to this obvious instance of police brutality, from which the only possible conclusion is a condemnation of the behavior of the LAPD. But I didn't go there to condemn the LAPD. That would be, in fact, the opposite of my job. So please just move on past it. Don't.
What a Weasley little liar, bro. What a fucking liar. She's actually trying to appeal to some like Concridian sense of objective journalism, and he's calling her a fucking liar. This is lazy propaganda. It's fucking embarrassing.
Don't think about it too much. Don't worry about it too much, okay? Come on, guys. This isn't my job. As a journalist, my job is not, in fact, there to show you. I'm not going there to...
I'm not there in order to get information. I'm there to be the propaganda wing of the military-industrial complex and police state. That's my job. That's what Vaush is saying, by the way. He read one Noam Chomsky book. He read one Noam Chomsky book 20 fucking years ago, and he hasn't changed his personality since 20 fucking years ago, nor has he consumed any additional information. That's another thing I hate about these fucking, I'll say it. It's a fucking grift, man. Even if he believes his own bullshit, the grift of it is pandering to the least common denominator of your fucking audience, okay? This is what I hate about the grift, okay? You're not even consuming new information. You already have your worldview. Your worldview got set when you were 16, and there's no need to update your worldview with any new information. It's so fucking lazy.
To show you the truth. You're not getting an insight into the dark heart of the behavior of the police at these protests. Move on.
You know, a really chaotic situation that's unfolding in Los Angeles.
I mean, Lauren,
the chaos that's unfolding. Neutral language. Well, not even neutral. Nobody talks like this unless they're talking about the behavior of the protesters.
got so much grace, and as Carl said, we know that about you, and none of us ever want to be the story. You want to be reporting on the facts and what's unfolding in front of you, and you do that so well, and you've brought that to our audiences.
If you don't think, by the way, that this isn't a massive psyop, can you explain to me why they're talking like this? Under what circumstances would a reporter getting shot by the police for no reason be covered with like, hey, listen, we know you're normally a really good reporter. Normally stuff like this doesn't happen to you. Does anyone have any non-conspiratorial explanation for this?
Yeah, I have a non-conspiratorial explanation because I'm not a fucking idiot and I'm not your 80 IQ audience, Vaush. What's going on is 40 or 50 years ago, there was this concept called objective journalism where not everything was so colored with bias. And so what's happening is these journalists are trying to appeal to that sense of objectivity because they want their audiences to be relatively well informed with a minimal, because we all have biases, with a minimum amount of bias. So what this journalist is saying is, I believe in this ideologically. And so I like to try to stay as far away from being involved specifically with the protesters or involved specifically with law enforcement, because I'm trying to get you the facts as I am able to understand them from as objective as an understanding as possible. But the truth is, we are so brain broken in the United States of America that we no longer even recognize attempts at some level of understanding objective reality. And a reporter feeling contrite about the fact that they've now colored a story because they've gotten so involved is viewed as her sweeping for the military industrial complex in law enforcement instead of her attempts to hold up the ideals of journalism. Not everybody is as biased as you, Vaush. Not everybody is trying to tell a narrative as grossly biased as you, Vaush. So you pretending that they are who you are is a fucking lie. And it sucks that you're like this.
Because there is none. You do not hate the regime enough, man.
Said for days now, and we take our hats off to you because you've been doing an incredible job. And yeah, just
he said moments ago that she was apologizing for doing her job, and they were effectively chastising her for for making the police look bad. That's not what's happening. He's totally reframing what's going on. She did her job and got injured, but it's not the way that she likes to do her job. And they're praising her bravery and attempts to do her job well. That's what's happening. Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining, Vaush.
the way that that officer turned and pointed at you and targeted you with your back to him, I mean, it's unforgivable.
Oh, it's unforgivable. Oh, they're criticizing the law enforcement establishment. Let's see if Vaush or his chat, let's see if they track the fact that you just had a blistering critique of the law enforcement officer who just targeted an Australian journalist. Let's see if he updates his talking points or if he just regurgitates his talking points.
And we really feel for you.
Okay, letting a little through. Okay.
Oh, letting a little through. Or maybe you were dead fucking wrong, Vaush, and you're making shit up.
You know, we thank you for your grace, frankly.
Lauren, you're going to be part of this story now ongoing. Do you have any reservations?
I mean,
Reservations? She got shot. What the are you talking about, man? What the such weird, evil, alien corporate media shit. You're all co-workers. She should.
What he's asking, because Vaush still needs to try to hammer the talking points because he's not somebody who's looking for truth. He's somebody who's looking to hammer through propaganda to tens of thousands of disaffected kids on the internet. Is what he's asking is, are you worried about going onto the street tomorrow? That's what he just asked. Do not accept this reframing from Vaush. He's fucking lying to you.
Should come on here and these two should be like, Cole, blimey, that guy shot you. Are you all right? That looked awful. I don't know. That was close enough to an Australian accent.
That's what he just asked. He just asked, hey, you just got shot in your ass. And we know you don't like being involved in stories, but you're the center of an international story right now. Do you have any fears about going back onto the street tomorrow? He's doing what Vaush is criticizing him to do.
Accent. That they should, this weird, hushed whispers. Normally this doesn't happen. This sort of thing isn't supposed to happen. That's British. I don't care.
And I think that it's so important that, journalists are out there doing our job, and we've got to keep on doing that. It's, no journalist wants to be the story. And certainly
Well, I must have my definition of journalism must be different. I'm sorry. I guess I'm working off of some obsolete definition. I'm so sorry for getting shot by the police. Famously in history, journalists have never made big stories out of their involvement in police brutality or.
That's not the point. He knows it's not the point. What she's saying is they're trying to appeal to I say Cronkitean. I understand you guys might not understand the reference. Walter Cronkite was a very famous news journalist in the 60s and 70s who was oftentimes praised for trying to relay the news in as objective as a fashion as possible. and he was oftentimes cited as like the gold standard of journalism. And when he offered an opinion, he told you that it was his opinion, and he delineated the facts that he was reporting versus the opinions that he was offering because he believed in some level of objective reality. And so journalists, regardless of whether or not this is true, whether or not Cronkitean journalism was ever actually a thing, they try to, in their ideals, serve this concept of objective reporting. And so what you're seeing right now is you're seeing 2 or 3 normal people trying to cling to the ideals with which they were raised, and you're seeing somebody chastising them and calling them propaganda stooges, in case you were confused about what's going on your screen right now.
Government corruption or impropriety. That's just normally, listen, okay? The reporter should stay out of the story. That's what reporting is, after all.
I hope that, we can move on from that and, focus what is...
Move on from the story? Literally, like, Jesus Christ. Like, there's like a big flashing sign in the studio saying, remember your jobs. Absolutely psycho. And let's just, the totally normal thing to agree upon after something like this happens. And we all agree to move on. Let's just move on and put this behind us. It's just, doesn't it fill you with like sadness and rage? So many people are being radicalized off the video of her being shot, but they basically dragged her here at gunpoint and said, you know your job. You know who you...
No, that's not what's happening, and you're fucking lying again. Sorry, guys. I hate to pause every 2 minutes, but the amount of like lies per minute is actually impressive, to the point that, you know what, I think I just have to do it. I just have to I just have to accept the fact that like Vaush is fucking lost. I just have to accept the fact that he's lost, which is sad. Again, it's sad. I feel like the man has redeeming qualities, but I have to accept the fact that he's fucking lost. And it's not just like the horse pedo shit. It's this. Because he's done this dozens of times. I've watched him do it dozens of times, and it's just, he's fucking lying. He's lying. For the 50th time, in case you don't understand it, journalists, rightly or wrongly, believe that there is a way to present facts to their audiences as objectively as possible with a minimum amount of bias. And so they try to do that because that's the gold standard of journalism, is presenting stories with a minimum amount of bias. And if you have bias, to inform your audience about your bias. That was the standard in journalism. Since the end of the fairness doctrine in the 1980s, this has no longer been a standard. But in some ways, Australia might be better than the United States, where they still try to hold on to this gold standard of journalism, whereas we haven't done it. Vaush, in the alternative media landscape, is a worse way of consuming information than legacy media in the 60s through the 80s, because at least they pretended to try to care about facts and bias and propagandistic narratives. And so what Vaush is doing is he's watching a woman who got shot in the ass by cops say, listen, I'm a journalist. I'm here to observe what's happening on the ground and inject as minimum amount of bias on the facts on the ground as possible. And by getting shot in the ass by a cop, I have removed that sense of bias. And so as a result, while it is what happens during these chaotic events, the story is kind of fucked, right? The story is kind of fucked. But Vaush can't accept that. What he has to assume is that this is some kind of apologia on behalf of law enforcement, which it is not. Literally, the other host said that cop was being a piece of shit and he targeted you and shot you in the ass when you weren't doing anything, which is unforgivable. And she's like, yeah, but you know what? I want to go out onto the street and I want to report on what's going on as maximally as possible. That's what she said. She's not a propaganda wing of the military industrial complex. She's not a propaganda wing of the law enforcement institution. She's a normal, normie, foreign journalist trying to do her job as objectively as possible. And Vaush is trying to rewrite this narrative for his own ends. It's repulsive. Okay. I'm going to give him 1 more minute, but if he loops, then I'm going to stop it and engage with chat. Because I have a feeling that we're going to have some mixed opinions in here about the way that I'm viewing Vaush's coverage.
You serve. Now apologize. Apologize for making the nice police officer look bad.
Okay, go fuck yourself. You're just lying. That's it. That's all I have to say. Vaush is fucking lying. He's lying. He's looking at facts. He's shoehorning them into his own narrative, which I find repulsive. You're a 3,000 IQ Giga Chad or Giga Stacy. Get your fucking ass over to CGG. You should not be slumming it with those fucking losers in VGG, okay?